Hello and welcome back to The Dive, Season 2, Episode 16, coming to you on the eve of the play-in knockout stage for the Mid-Season Invitational. For those of you wondering, we're filming this at 10:50 a.m. on Monday morning. We'll be leaving to fly to Berlin for the group stages tomorrow, so we wanted to get one in and kind of talk about what's happening in play-in, preview the knockout stage, and then also talk about group stages.
Yeah, and I'm pretty excited, man. I mean, it feels like anytime you have a break like this, I feel like I really enjoy the first little bit, and then the longer the time goes on, I start getting more and more like, okay, let's get back to it. Let's get some games going. So I've been getting really excited for the group stage, which is when I'm first going, but playing has been a lot of fun to watch, and it's been kind of cool to see and try to start establishing some early opinions on what the meta will be like and which teams might actually join the main stage.
Yeah, I really enjoy MSI, especially because, the whole region gets behind one team. So it kind of like focuses the fan groups of every single region. Mm-hmm. And that makes for really exciting group stages. So definitely looking forward to it as well.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the play-in stages? Because I enjoyed the Gambit game with Karthus and Nocturne because it was a Season 2 throwback. I don't think that composition is going to work against pretty much anybody else because you have to snowball super hard, and if they ever kind of gank bottom, you just lose.
Jin and Orin, too.
Yeah, it was fully, you press R on 2 people,
from
3
across
people,
the whole screen.
4 people. You're going to kill 3 because they were ahead. It was really, really cool in that moment, but I just don't think it's going to work again. But overall on the play-in stage, what do you guys think?
Those types of things, I want to go more on that one. I just love those types of things where you see it and, a lot of those things don't end up mattering that much like you're saying. But the theory crafting that you can put into it is so cool. And you're like, oh, yeah. And you turn off the lights and then you're going to get the backline. They're going to be separated and use all these, extra layers of strategy that aren't actually implemented. But those are definitely fun to go theory crafting.
Well, another example of that, ones that never work, is this brings me back to 2012. Just, hey, let's do all of the trap champions possible. So you'd bring Shaco, Heimerdinger, Teemo, Nidalee, and you just put everything in the jungle. And it was really fun when you're just with the 5-man theory crafting, let's make as many possible traps as we can. And then usually the way it plays out is the other team just doesn't go into the jungle and they just stay in lane and win the game. But the Gambit one with just everyone press R and dive is that type of early on league, hey, how much of this stuff can we stack to make it work? And to see it actually work on an international stage was pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. That was actually probably my favorite game. I watched all the games. That was probably my favorite game of the tournament. I thought it was both, interesting, but also seeing it work out. I think a lot of people were talking about this last pretty troll game, Supermassive Play.
That was gonna be mine.
I didn't even think it was that fun to watch though.
I thought it was funny.
It was 4 people role swapping, 380 carries, full physical against the top Rammus who just presses W and stands there.
So hold on, let's explain this game. This was the one between Supermassive, who just blasted everyone.
They were already 5-0, so they had already got out of their group.
They blasted everyone. They were for sure getting out. They looked like maybe the best team of the entire plans that we've seen to this point, versus Kaboom, who were obviously also already out.
Only had 3 wins, so the best they could do is get to 4.
And I just liked watching the champ select as it developed, because it started out pretty serious. The bands were pretty serious, and then they're locking in first pick Kaisa, and I was like, oh yeah, they're not messing around. They're really gonna go for blasting them, and they left Kaisa open. That's nuts. And then they lock in another 80 carry and another 80 carry, and you're like, wait a second. And by the time it gets to the last pick, I forget who it was, but the last pick, they get Rammus. And I'm like, oh my God, everyone's trolling except this guy. Because all it takes in a game like that is you have everyone, we're having fun. And then the other team's like, all right, we're going to pick the tank now, the full armor versus the AD carry team. And I was like, well, they're probably not going to have a good time in that one.
Well, I mean, and they're also doing GBM was also jungling. They had 2 junglers and he's just counter jungling his own jungler and stuff. They were just trolling, but it was a funny game, but after a little bit, I was like, okay, okay, you're gonna
that's what they felt too, because the funniest thing about this game to me was that they ended with a surrender.
Yeah,
and you almost never see surrenders anymore in competitive games. And this one obviously didn't have meaning for standings or anything like that, but it made me feel like this is one of my rank flex games with my friends that are really good players, but they troll around all the time, and I just get fed up with their trolling at some point, and you're like, we're going to lose.
Get me out of here.
Get me out of here. I want this to be over. And we saw it on the stage.
It was right after GBM got one shot by the Elise.
Yeah, they had everyone like alive still, and they're like,
Yeah, one thing, as fun as because it actually is a meaningless game in the grand context of who makes it out a group. It doesn't change any of the world implications. It doesn't change whether or not, they have enough points to make it a next time. But the one thing I don't like, since I'm a stats nerd, is how games like this ruin your all-time stats. Because it's, oh, wow, yeah, this is the most kills ever in an MSI game. So now if we have an actual group stage game or an actual semifinal game where there's 65 kills, yeah, it's the second most ever in an MSI game because that time Supermassive and Kaboom trolled overdoes that. And EULCS had a game like this really early on in, I think it was 2014 spring, like SK Gaming. NIF had 48 assists or something in the game because it was just almost 100 kills. Now no one can ever get most assists in a game officially for EULCS.
Unless you troll even harder.
I mean, I wish there was a way to just redact those games from stats and just be okay with it.
Yeah, it almost has to be like an asterisk.
Well,
game.
it's kind of hard because then I'm thinking back to, I think it was a Worlds group stage game where Peanut on Lee Sin had like 20 kills at like 10 minutes or something.
Yeah, he had 14 kills.
The other team wasn't trolling.
That was a real game.
He was just shitting on them so hard. It was some wildcard team or whatever. And he would.
It was against Gigabyte Marines. It was last year.
Oh, yeah. See, it was that. Yeah, like, and I was like, well,
it's a good team.
Yeah, like that was a really good team, and they were just like. Pounding them, but so you have to have some way to.
I know,
really
that game
counts.
It mattered, right? It wasn't a meaningless results game.
But overall, I mean, I did really enjoy the play-in. I think when I was looking at like the overall strength of the teams and stuff, like it's pretty clear that this is a fairly large step down. I think from most of the major regions' top teams when you do look at it. Like I think all of the teams did certain things really, really well. But really the only teams, Gambit to a lesser extent, but really the only team it felt like kind of was bringing everything together a bit more was Supermassive. Like I felt they were by far and away the best team out of either group when I was watching. But I mean, even watching a team like Direwolves, like I felt like they did a lot of things right, but the things that they did wrong were like sometimes so like gratuitous. Like they make such a big mistake that it costs them. It like overwrites everything else that they had done well. Like one of the games, they went for this 20-minute Baron with everyone up. They get actually like spotted, and they just continue to do it. They get wiped. They give up the 20-minute Baron. Your game is over, right? Like you don't get to make mistakes that big, and that's kind of one of the things that I think sometimes these teams were missing, like whether it's a poor call or just like nerves or whatever it is. It felt like oftentimes there was like that one really big mistake that the teams would make that would kind of really cost them in the game. But there was like really strong individual plays at times. Like some of the things were really fairly inconsistent. Talking about Direwolves again, like Chippies would have these games where it was like he was looking super good, and then you have games where like. I mean,
he can't even hit a Camille hook shot.
Yeah, well, and his Aurelia game where he gets first blooded by GP at like level 3 or something like that. He like he like queues in at like 10% HP. He's like, but I need this CS though. You know what I mean? Like when you're watching stuff like that, you're like, come on, man. Like better. Like you know better. You're just getting greedy, right? But it was fun. I mean, I think especially day one was kind of crazy because it was like there was like lots of mistakes, but everyone's playing so aggressive and the games were fast and there was like tons of kills. So there was a lot of action. But I do think when you're watching an event like this, it makes it really hard to judge the relative strength of these teams compared to some of the relative strength of other teams because it's hard to compare the levels of competition, right? So Supermassive looked really good, but does that make Supermassive actually like a favorite against another team that wasn't there?
And one thing it kind of reinforced for me as well is when everyone said Supermassive, some of the players that were on the analyst desk said Supermassive is so good at playing standard.
Yeah.
Right? They can just play standard against everyone. That's why they're so hard to beat, because if you go standard against them, you lose. Therefore, you have to try something different. And then there's a reason people play standard, because it's the best way of playing. It's not because they're boring. It's because that's the optimal way to win. And they crush like that. And then I also thought, like, is this what it feels like to only watch LCK and then watch the NALCS and be like, yo, boy, sometimes these guys aren't as good? Because I've heard that attitude so many times, and I felt it a little bit here. Because, like, there's in the back of my head this like sense of elitism that, oh man, our league would smash these guys. And that creeps in to your head sometimes when you're watching these because things you're used to seeing aren't necessarily happening here. And I don't think that makes them bad teams for what it's worth. I think it's just an interesting way of looking at it. Means they're going to struggle against those teams, just like we always see the LCS teams struggle up against Korea. But I want to see how these teams make the next jump.
Yeah, I like the discussion of kind of standard play and how people have seen so much that, quote unquote standard play, and you can just play standard or whatever, and it's slower, and it revolves around this idea of removing a lot of the risk because the teams that are going to want to play standard are going to want the highest percentage chance to win any individual game, right? And so for pro play, that always involves reducing a lot of these more risky plays.
Yep.
But for me, the teams that I love the most and the teams that will reach, like the highest peaks are the teams that do take those risks, but are able to pull off those plays, right? If you have super aggressive, like Gigabyte Marines was a great example from last year where they just surprised everyone and had so much success and actually continued success. Like it wasn't just a couple one-off things. And then you also have, super aggressive teams like Kingzone and stuff like that that can pull off things like that. And it's always a very interesting discussion to have as far as the style of play and when is it, they're just being super aggressive and going balls to the
versus
wall.
they think it's the optimal way to win.
I mean, I think to me, it's like you have to have a mix, right? To be the best possible team, you need to be able to throw some of these curveballs, turn on the aggression, like go for level 1 invades, do these sorts of things because that keeps teams honest. They can't, kind of outgreed you and do these sort of silly plays.
You need like a little bit of MLXG.
Yeah, exactly. Just a little,
but not
a lot. Not a whole, yeah. But I mean, it's one of those things where it's, to me, the best teams when they do it, it's calculated and it makes sense, right? It's one of those things when you think of like SKT doing something crazy and coming back, it's because they took a low percentage play and they fully committed to it. And then they had, the skill and the, and the coordination to actually pull it off, right? So those sorts of plays are kind of the pinnacle when you think about it because it's like, oh yes, they're 10K gold down, but there's this one small opportunity where if they, like Wolf pulls off the Rakan combo and Shockwave hits everyone, well, then they can maybe win the game. And guess what? They find that moment and they make it work.
And I think it's just to try and make it a bit full circle. It's about how hard it actually is to be really good at this game and how much one little mistake can easily be punished. Because a lot of times when you, even looking at some of the stats, when you look at the LCK, how they're the lowest in jungle proximity of all the regions in the world, and they're the lowest in combined kills per minute. It doesn't mean that they're slow teams because they will just as easily exploit any small mistake another team makes. Peanut getting 14 kills against Gigabyte Marines, it's because they were making so many mistakes and he was punishing every single one of them and no one else was good enough to do that. So I think that's one of the things that happen when we're seeing, we see these mistakes. It's because a lot of the league we're used to watching has gotten to a point where they're not making as many mistakes. So it's an interesting growth for these teams in Play-In.
Yeah, and I think it's also just about like realizing when you have to make the risky play. Like sometimes when the teams like more of what I saw in play-ins was, making that risky play when you're not really behind, you're not at the point where I feel like you always have to measure risk versus reward, right? If it's like a 10% play, but you have a 5% chance of winning the game, hey, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Like, but when the game is still pretty even and you're going for this like 30, 20% play, you're trying to pull off the 1v2, it probably doesn't make sense, right? And that's more of, I think, where things fell flat. But it was cool. Like I like that you brought up players talking about Supermassive on the analyst desk because King, the ADC for the OPL, for Direwolves, he was talking about them, and the way he talked about them made it seem like he didn't even think that the other teams there were even in their league, including his team. He's like, it's kind of like when I'm playing on ladder and I get up against a really low elo team and you just know you can't lose. He's like, that's what it must be like for Supermassive playing in this tournament, right? And to hear a player who's in their group still was in the event, that was after their first day of play, still could have actually theoretically beat them and made it through. Talking about them in that light was just like, damn, like they think they're so much better. So Supermassive really does feel like kind of the hope from that group.
All right, so Supermassive versus Evos and Gamut versus Flash Wolves. Let's actually just start with Supermassive versus Evos. So Evos is in the slot that essentially Gigabyte Marines would have been in had Gigabyte Marines won that league. But During the regular season, actually, EVOS was the better team than the Marines. They were 12-2 in the regular season. Gigabyte Marines was 9-5, and then EVOS beat Gigabyte Marines in the final 3-2. So for most of the split, they were the better team than Gigabyte Marines, and they were also the better team during the finals.
They also are, it's worth mentioning, it's a couple guys from Gigabyte Marines from last year.
Yeah.
Stark and Slay, both coming over from there. It's a new organization, but it has a lot of experience. Ron OP as well was actually, an all-star representative for the VCS, or for GPL back then, I guess. Now it's the VCS.
Yep.
So this is a team with actually quite a lot of experience.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, because there are a lot of fans of Gigabyte Marines and also YG, the other, quite good Vietnamese team that we've seen.
Young generation.
Yeah, but this team definitely had the extra edge over both of them. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. The other thing about this team, though, is that if people are expecting Gigabyte Marines from last year and super crazy early game stuff and these multi-camp leashes and all this more random stuff, they're going to be a little bit disappointed, I think. Because this team doesn't play like the Gigabyte Marines team from last year, even though they do have a couple of the players from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what made that work was Levi, just being honest, right? With
And
Gigabyte Marines.
I'd say and the coach.
And the coach, totally.
I think most of the coach.
Yeah, the coach, I think, was the one coming up with a lot of these brilliant strategies, but I think Levi was so much of a standout player for Gigabyte Marines for me that he was able to take over some of these games and get such massive farm advantages and play his own unique style to really kind of make those strategies come to life. And this is certainly not that team. But I will say, as far as a league having an explosive play style, the VCS has by far the most kills per minute. They have the fastest games out of every region. They have the most kills in their games of every region. This is, when you talk about LPL being really fast, LPL is the fastest of the major regions. This is the fastest of every region, right?
Yep.
So they are the team that won that. It doesn't mean that they're only that play style, but they are an explosive team. They do like to play, very aggressively, and it'll be pretty interesting to me to see how they're going to stack up, because I do think I think clearly Supermassive was the strongest team from all of play-ins, and I felt that EVOS was probably weaker than Flash Wolves, right? And so this is, if there were to be one of the major regions or whatever getting knocked out and one of the play-in teams taking their spot, this was probably that matchup where it could most likely happen.
Yeah, the difference that I'm talking about for this team in particular, not just, the region is super aggressive early game, but this team in particular, if you're looking at the stats that we went over, their first blood percentage in the region is very low because their jungler doesn't go for the super early ganks, and his jungle proximity is actually the last place of the entire league for the early game. So that's why people will be thrown off a little bit if they're expecting, Levi jumping out of, you can't expect everyone to be Levi.
Yeah. We can only aspire to be Levi.
All right. I think Supermassive, I'm going to actually make them a slight favorite in the series. I was really impressed with the way they played. Their bottom lane, particularly, I thought Snowflower was super good, even though GBM isn't the best mid laner anymore, in my opinion, especially after watching him in North America. He's still good and plays a lot of different picks, so I think they're going to be pretty powerful.
Yeah, for me, especially the bottom lane matchup in this head-to-head between these two, I think is going to be really interesting because again, a lot of the stats are for top side as far as where EVOS plays.
Yeah.
And if they spend so much of their time on top side, I really think Snowflower is just such an incredible playmaker. If they're not banning out Thresh and Rakan and whatever playmaker he's popping off on, then I think they have to really be worried about their bottom side getting run over.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because, like you said, EVOS is a very top-focused team. They like to play through Stark, but at the same time, I think Fabulous was actually one of the standout players in all of play-in as well. His GP was super nasty. He was just very consistent throughout, so he may be pretty hard to exploit. But again, when I'm looking at these, it makes it really hard for me because I think that EVOS, based off just watching some of their games, I felt like they were a step above the rest of Supermassive's competition. Like they look clearly better than Direwolves and some of these other Kaboom and some of these other teams to me. So it's really hard to know like how it's actually going to stack up. I tend to think this is the best chance, but I feel like I may still be favoring Evos like slightly.
Okay.
But I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see Supermassive win. It's just kind of like which kind of playstyle is actually going to come out on top, because Supermassive does feel much more bottom lane focused. I think Snowflower was probably my best player of all the play-ins tournament. Like I think he was fantastic, and it's really these two teams that are either going to play these different styles if they stick to it.
Right.
Evo's trying to play through top and Supermassive trying to play through bottom, or is one of them going to kind of change it up and be like, okay, no, we'll try to match that.
I mean,
that's always interesting when one team forces the other team, who's usually plays topside, to be like, okay, we're going to have to protect against the strength of the other team. Yeah. And I feel like you always start to lose ground in that matchup.
Yeah, and I think just looking at the meta and the teams that have been successful, if they're close to evenly strength teams, one team plays through bot and one team plays through top, bot's going to win easily. Look at how good Echo Fox was, just to take it back to NA, at top jungle, and how hard they actually had to smash top jungle in order to win towards the end of the season. Like, it's so much about bottom lane right now.
It totally is, but at the same time with Echo Fox, like to me, it was the fact that their bottom lane was just getting slammed in 2v2 and stuff, because I think you can't play purely through top. But if your bottom lane could be kind of like limping along and surviving, and you put your top laner ahead, and then they can transfer that lead to bottom lane, through TP ganks and forcing team fights around Dragon, these sorts of things, I think you can make it work, because you can kind of move that lead around the map. But I definitely agree, like you have to at some point get down there and kind of get that lead, because if your bottom lane is getting slammed, even if you're playing a hardcore scaling split pusher like Fiora or something or whatever, it doesn't matter. If the other team is just grouping and sieging, you have to then be forced to group, and you can't be effective.
Yeah, I feel like the key is why bottom lane is so important right now is because team fighting is so important in the current meta, and it's so much easier to team fight around a fed bottom lane. You're just like, all right, group up and protect the AD carry, versus team fighting or split pushing around a fed top laner, depending on what champion it is. It's just a lot more difficult to execute. It can be done, like you're saying. It's definitely still a viable win condition. Just, again, if you're playing the percentages.
Yeah. Next series, Gambit versus Flash Wolves. So you got a quick
one last little thing, and I think like even more, I think crazy with your point, talking about how more easy it is to play around a fed guy like from the bot lane. It's also a lot easier to play against with a top laner who is way behind, right? Because you put a top laner on a tank, he's down 80 CS, 100 CS, but he's playing Ornn. Well, you can still press R, right? But when your Caitlyn is down 100 CS and can't do
you can still press R.
You can still press R.
Yeah, but it won't do anything. That's the difference, and that's one of the things that makes it even more, kind of easy to play around bot lane.
Yeah, totally agree. Gambit versus Flash Wolves. We talked about the favorite moment of the play-in being Gambit's all press R comp. They could also all press R versus Flash Wolves. And remember, this is a Flash Wolves without Karsa. Karsa is on RNG now. Played one game in the LPL finals, I think. He's been getting subbed into that with MLXG. But Flash Wolves still made it back even without Karsa. But how do you guys think they're going to do?
I mean, Flash Wolves was, if anything, like, as dominant or maybe even more dominant in their league, but it's like they're 13-1 in matches, 26 and 5 overall in games. They 3-0'd their finals. And this year it was actually like pretty much a 2-team league. It was G-Rex and the Flash Wolves that were the two best teams by far. AHQ and J-Team kind of fell off. And when you look at LMS, statistically, like I've watched, some of the Flash Wolves games, and when you start looking at this statistically, it's funny because they're like statistically by far the best team at MSI. When you're looking at like in categories, they're first in like almost every category. But it's because their league is so top heavy too. Like they're a strong team, but the rest of their region, besides really G-Rex, is consisting of quite a lot of very weak teams comparatively. And so they just slam their competition, and then they have these insane stats, and it makes it very hard to really kind of look at that and take it as apples to apples. Yeah.
MMD also hasn't been starting that much. New top laner Hanabi, but they still have Maple and Sword Art, and then Betty as their AD carry. So they still have that international experience. Remember, the team with MMD, or MD, as Deficio called them sometimes, and Karsa, made it into bracket stage of MSI, or knockout stage of MSI, 2 years in a row. They beat TSM in the tiebreaker last year, and the year before, they actually beat SKT twice in the group stage. So in a sense, they show up and they randomly take games off Korea, then they usually don't make it to finals. Similar strength team in your thought, or are they actually a step weaker? Because I think if they're a similar strength, they should be huge favorites against Gambit.
For me, there's no way I'm giving them the same credit that I gave the old lineup. Because you can be like, oh, they randomly took games off Korea. I'm like, most of the reason was Maple and Karsa as a duo was them, taking games off SKT and stuff and camping Faker or getting early kills. And I just feel like the loss of Karsa was a really big hit. I mean, MMD being switched out isn't as big to me. But Mugen, he's a European CS jungler. They got him from
it's Red Bulls, I think.
Yeah, something like Red Bulls. And I mean, no offense to him, but I just don't think there's any way I'm instantly going to give him as much credit as Karsa with the old lineup that Karsa had played years and years with, and they had that huge synergy.
And Hanabi is a rookie, right? And whether or not he did very well in your region, we have seen time and time again, when you bring new players to an international stage, there's a new level of nerves. There is, that kind of thing. And I tend to agree that I don't necessarily put them on the same level as what the previous team was. And you also have to look back at the most recent Worlds, where Flash Wolves did struggle, quite a bit more. They did make it out of groups at MSI, but they didn't at Worlds. And certainly I think had been looking more vulnerable over the years. As time went on, it felt like Maple and Karsa were not so much better than the competition that they could kind of just like carry this team through. And it'll be interesting to see like how they're going to do. I still think that they are a pretty heavy favorite above Gambit, though.
Yeah, because you also look at Gambit, and they were 0-4 in the Worlds play-in last year. They did better this year because they said they had much better prep. They too have a rookie in Lodic as their AD carry.
Yeah. I mean, watching Gambit was super fun because I always love the nostalgia of watching any super old players that were around from when we started. Yeah, seeing Diamond is just so fun. And with Olaf in the state that he's in right now, it seems so perfect because it almost you remember associating him with Darian on Shyvana invading on top side, and Diamond, one of the super early innovators as far as very aggressive jungle invades. So like the early games where, Diamond's controlling, is invading with Olaf and just like smashing the guy. I was like, oh yeah, this is sick. And then like they get in the mid game and the late game, they're making a lot of these mistakes as I was talking about. I was like, I might get a little bit dicey later. So I also would favor Flash Wolves, but this is another one that's also like Azale was talking about, where you need to. It's more difficult to judge the competition that the two have been playing against because they're so different.
I think it's really possible that there's an upset, but I would make this 80-20.
Yeah, probably more
Flash
confident in
Wolves
this one than the first one.
I am also not that confident, though, that if Flash Wolves wins, that they won't be last place in the actual MSI group stage. As in the winner of Supermassive versus Evos might end up beating them later. There's a chance. Just because I have a pretty high opinion of Supermassive right now. So transitive properties would mean if Evos beats them, I'd also have a pretty high opinion of them. And I don't necessarily share that with Flash Wolves right now. But MSI is always, to me, the most difficult tournament to actually peg exactly where a team is going to finish because it's just the one team from the region. So normally there's the region strength. It's something like Worlds. There's 3 teams from the region. You can usually say like, oh yeah, one team will go 1-5, but then someone else will go 4-2, and it'll still seem like that region is strong. You might just get that 1-5 team, and then you have no backup team to go and redeem your region. Yeah. So that's what
sometimes we need that backup.
Sometimes you need that Cloud9 team to just sneak out of groups and say we made it. Yeah, it's not here.
Well, we're sending the backup, fourth backup team now.
Yeah,
in Team Liquid.
They're set.
So definitely excited.
So MSI is also the tournament that has a fun amount of variance. You think back to the history of the tournament, 2015, China won.
Yep.
Right? 2016, NA was in finals. Last year, EU was in finals. Korea's always in finals. But there is that level of variance.
It's so crazy when we only allow one Korean team to come. How many other regions get
really
to make it far?
Well, it's cool that it's been China, EU, and NA, different regions in finals with Korea each time.
Yeah, I'm trolling you.
Yeah, you suck. You want to get to meta for MSI before we preview the teams that are auto-seeded into the group stage?
Yeah. Well, predictions for this
Hell
one,
yeah.
for this series?
I'm going to say
I think
Flash Wolves strongly, 80-20.
I think we all favored Flash Wolves
Yeah.
already. Yeah, we did.
No series score? No series score?
We didn't do series score for the last one. All right.
I said 3-2
The
for...
previous one will be Supermassive 3-1. This one will be Flash Wolves 3-1.
Okay. Moving on to main stage then.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
So main stage obviously has preceded the top team from LCK, LPL, EU, and NA. Kingzone Dragon X, RNG, Fnatic, and Team Liquid. Kobe.
I was wondering if you wanted to touch on the meta that we saw in play-ins and maybe what will change as we move to this group, or you want to do these teams first and then discuss the meta?
I'm down for either one. I'd say we can talk a little bit about the meta because there are standout picks in each role. I was looking at this earlier. One thing that surprised me a little bit was the presence of Morg being now the tied with Rakan for the most pick ban support. They're both at 96% presence. That's the support. 80 carry has been Kai'Sa. I think that's probably permabanned throughout. Kai'Sa, I'm just going to run down like the most picked, the super high presence for each role. Kai'Sa, Caitlyn, then Ezreal's the third 80 carry. Mid lane actually has Vladimir as the highest presence, which is interesting, followed by Swain, Karma, Cassio, and 46% on Azir. Jungle, Trundle is the dominant jungler, with Kha'Zix, Olaf, and Skarner falling behind that. And then top lane has been the one that's actually, I feel like, changed the least. Gangplank is number one at 96% presence, followed by Ornn, Camille, Vladimir is a flex pick, Swain's a flex pick, and Sion is also a flex pick. So what stands out to you out of those?
I mean, I think for the most part, it's like a lot of pretty normal stuff. I think the fact that like Vladimir is that high up, Morgana is that high up, was like a bit more surprising to me. Also even just looking at like, so there is presence that's interesting, but also looking at like the actual champions that were the most picked and how they performed. Like Karma was actually the most picked mid laner in play-ins, and it went 1-6. That was kind of interesting to me to see not only that teams consistently thought it was still worth that pick, but that they weren't really able to convert what had been working in scrims to stage. And also how Caitlyn was by far the most picked 80 carry and also didn't really have that much success here too.
I feel like these are super low sample sizes
They are.
and the teams are so lopsided that I'm
It's
not
hard,
really
yeah.
taking into account the win rates at all, actually, because I'm like, well, if Supermassive picks whatever champions, those are the ones that are going to get the wins. Also, I wasn't actually surprised by the prevalence of Morgana. Maybe it's because we have been seeing so much Caitlyn Morgana, and I was totally on board. But I just feel like she has been getting stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
And the changes kind of went under people's radar, after they changed the W and stuff like that. I just think that she's extremely powerful, especially since her laning phase is good, and you can have the utility of Black Shield for later with so much of it being around, protecting an 80 carry and stuff, and keeping someone immune to CC.
And she works so well against all the other supports that are getting picked.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing. Rakan, Braum, Thresh, Alistar. Morgana pretty much shuts all those down. Unless we're starting to see like the poke supports or the Janna stuff come back, Morgana will stay strong.
Well, and I was kind of surprised though that we didn't see any Tahm Kench. We saw 0 games with Tahm Kench, which I always see as like
I just think that Braum is so much better than Tahm Kench into like Rakan, and Rakan
is, but into
the
a
go-to
Morgana,
right now.
Like I always feel like that's such a strong pick, and also when people are playing, things like Skarner or like even like Anivia being able to save an 80 carry over an Anivia wall and these sorts of things, like plus all the tanks that were like playing CC tanks and things like this. Like I think Tahm Kench can fit really well. It's not necessarily for me about like the lane matchup, but it's about like people from from LCK play a lot of Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench has been used by all the major regions as an answer to these sorts of compositions for a long time. So I was kind of surprised to see that not coming out, and I do think that if people are going to be blind picking Morgana, then yes, you can answer it, I think, pretty well with either like poke supports or something that's just kind of like more can go even in lane and have more of an impact in a team fight like a Janna or something.
So
like that.
this is 8.8, and Tahm Kench got nerfed pretty decently on 8.8.
So maybe
was
maybe
the thing I was
don't
going to
feel
bring
like
up.
picking.
Yeah, his sustain for the thick skin, he got nerfed there, and then also the bonus move speed. when you devour someone. So I think that he was already like a low win rate, and people just really loved him for the crowd control denial. But I can definitely see these nerfs like pushing him a little bit more out. But I was going to talk about kind of the what to me is like the trinity of the support meta right now. Rakan, I feel like, is just the go-to, like so good right now after the buffs, extra ability power. We even saw people playing a mid a whole bunch.
That hasn't happened at MSI.
It hasn't happened at MSI, but
it could.
You should definitely be ready for it because it's a possible flex pick. And I love having random things feel, or at least things that feel random as the possible flex picks. Because it really changes up a lot of the strategy. But anyways, Rakan I think is going to be super high priority, or he's already super high priority. So that's not really a big prediction. But to me, the best answer is Braum, because you can just put up the shield and you have so much hard CC that you can just try and, if you can stick Rakan in one spot, then he blows up very quickly. So like that's like the one weakness of Rakan is if you can actually hold him down and you can kill him pretty quickly.
So you think it's a better answer than Morgana for?
I like Braum more than Morgana, but I always like the beefier, tankier styles. Morgana, you have to be super quick with your Black Shield. You have to be always cognizant about your positioning, and that's just too much for me and my little pea brain. So I always like Braum. I just put up the shield when he comes in. I'm like, kill this guy. But yeah, then the Morgana is the third part of the Trinity. With the crowd control denial, but also the lane phase that works so well with an AD carry that has either poke or long range or something like that. Obviously Caitlyn is the go-to match because we can binding plus trap after, and you get this huge duration, and you can push the wave very effectively with the W, and with her finding more ways to get mana also. The cooldown reduction on W actually becomes important because before you're like, well, it costs so much mana anyways. Like, I don't really care if I get some cooldown refunded, but now it does feel kind of more impactful. So yeah, that's kind of my take on at least the bottom support sort of meta that's been revolving.
Yeah, and I think something that's been happening for a while, definitely happened in regional playoffs, is the strength of the AD carry position yet again. And I think there are some other factors at play that created it that I don't think get talked about that much. Zeke's convergence is the one for me that I think has been huge in bringing the power level of a strong bottom lane through the roof. The fact that supports like Rakan have it core in their build, but then also junglers like Skarner and Trundle proc it at exactly the right time. And not only is it giving them more damage, because Zeke's Convergence gives you the 50% bonus magic damage over 2 seconds on hit, which, by the way, is absolutely nutty on Jhin. Because his AD gets so high and he's attacking slow anyway, that works super well. And I think I was going to have more points to that, but it also stops. It also lowers the need to build Last Whisper, because you're now splitting your damage between physical and magic damage, and it's basically letting you one-shot squishies as an AD carry because you're getting convergence. You have 80 to 90% crit because you've gone IE double zeal, and then usually like an Essence Reaver or a Bloodthirster on top of that for even more AD instead of going Last Whisper, and you absolutely destroy people. Like, it increased AD carry's damage almost as much as I feel like Ardent Sensor was back at Worlds. So we're right back into that bottom meta. It's not as dependent on rushing the sensor, but it's more dependent on getting to that one crit item, getting the Zeeks, and then crushing.
Be careful throwing around the Ardent Sensor meta.
It's not there yet, because you don't need it in every composition, but you should definitely try and fit a Zeeks on someone.
But it's just along the lines of like how important some of those supportive items are for ADs, right? And that role I also think has the most items that can support that role very well.
Yeah. So I was going to say, as far as the meta points for items, to me there were going to be two, basically I always look for the items that are just super gold efficient plus have really good passives or actives or whatever. And for me, there are two right now. One of them is definitely Zeke's.
Banner.
And the other one is definitely Banner.
Oh, I was going to say Shirelia's. I think there's three then.
I think Shirelia's is good. But the only thing is that you have to have the champion that's going to use those stats. And it's like, oh, this is the perfect Vladimir item. Or, you could probably flip it on like Swain or somebody also who wants to do that. But other than that, whereas Banner, I'm like, get one in every single game. Like, someone should be building this item. And it got even more powerful when we put more of the gold into cannons, because I have actually seen so much gold denied
because you miss it
by putting the banner on the cannon minion just early on in the game.
You can't last hit it. The turret does too much damage.
You put out extra pressure, like the minion wave control becomes so much easier because you get early game wave control just by having this almost, basically double or tripling the time it takes to kill off a cannon wave for the enemies. Plus, you get gold denial on top of it. So that's on top of it being an efficient item. And so, yeah, I feel like those are the two, standout items that once we get to group stage, it's going to be even more prevalent.
One of the things that I also think is really cool about Banner that I don't hear people talk about that much is how much you can end up actually controlling where the other jungler goes, right? So that is kind of the theory behind mid Karma and how it's been being played a lot is you rush a tier, then you go straight to a banner, and you build this banner in an AP versus AP matchup. I'm playing against a Vladimir. Vladimir will just lose his turret pre-10 minutes if you're 12 minutes, whatever. If you're just spamming banner, he can't actually defend it. So what has to happen is your Trundle or your Olaf or your whatever walks mid lane. Every time the banner gets popped, they smite it, they hit it with you, they kill it off. Great. But now you're giving up jungle priority. Now you're showing where your jungler is when you don't necessarily want to. You're opening up the possibility of counter jungling camps, of taking ganks and fights around other sides of the map when you know the jungler cannot be there to counter gank. And that is one of the things I think is really, really strong about it, because certain champions, I think, just cannot deal with it at all. I mean, Vladimir's hilariously bad against it. Azir is another meta pick that really, really, really can't deal with it too, but a lot of them struggle.
Azir is hilarious against a banner because his soldiers, which are tied to his auto attack, do only magic damage.
Yep.
So he has to pull the banner minion away from his soldiers or not have soldiers up just to do any damage to the banner minion. It's the hardest counter to him of pretty much all champions in the game. So
yeah, and I think it also has wider reaching effects on where the meta could be and what champions we're seeing, and some of them are getting pushed out. Because to me, that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen as much Nidalee as I thought we were going to see. Nidalee has been super strong in solo queue. Recently, people started playing her a whole bunch again. But if you have the Nidalee in there, jungle, you're like, come help me kill this banner. Oh, wait a second. You can't kill it either. Yeah. Well, that's going to be rough. The AP junglers, it's been a while since we've seen them all. Long gone are the days of.
It'll be a little longer, Kobe.
Whatever. Yeah,
it's going to be a little longer.
I think that the jungle meta, as far as since we're continuing on main champions and stuff for all the roles here, I think it's going to remain fairly stale. I don't see the jungle meta changing much at all. No. Still going to be the Trundle, Olaf.
I think we'll see more Graves. I really do think we'll see more Graves.
I thought that because he's so good in solo queue also. But the teams that I talk to always talk about how difficult it is to weave in marksman jungler. And Graves is he's the one who can get in because he's just halfway. And he's halfway there because he's kind of tanky or whatever. But he's still, the DPS jungler. So I think that we will see Graves. I don't think he'll be as kind of overwhelming as solo queue right now because he's getting banned all the time and stuff in solo queue. But
Trundle,
I don't think it's going to take over as much as those kind of standard ones that we've seen. But definitely, if the team has one of those power junglers looking to take over, you can definitely pop off,
especially with pushing lanes, because I think one of the biggest strengths is just how well you can counter jungle and mess around with the enemy jungler in their face. It can become extremely hard to deal with, and a lot of those really good Graves games, you don't just see them getting a lot of kills. They have double the farm of the other jungler because they can farm so effectively. And when you have pushing lanes and you can start counter jungling, I want to see a guy like Peanut, playing the Graves. You're talking about that 14 kill game.
That can definitely happen on Graves. The thing that people also don't talk about with Graves is how good the smokescreen is. They buffed it so the slow is even stronger. I think it lasts less time or something, but it's so strong right now. And seeing teams play around skills like that are such unique skills where it gives the vision denial, and you have multiple people splitting the team fight or focus firing someone in there. Those types of plays are super interesting when you can corner someone or use this soft quote unquote CC ability that actually is a very overwhelming thing to get hit with.
I really like, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I really hate blinds as a mechanic. And I mean, Smokescreen isn't technically a blind, but like Quinn blind, this like are some of the most frustrating abilities in the whole game for me. Because so one of the things is, if I'm the person who's getting blinded, right, and you guys are on my team, you just see this idiot running around in circles. I'm walking into like a skill shot.
I always see this idiot running around in circles when it's on my
but
team.
Sometimes,
boom!
But sometimes he's doing some good shit too. But not when he's blinded. So, it's like you see them walking into an AD carry and killing themselves. You see them walking into a choke and getting feasted. You see and as the person who's blind, you feel so bad. Either it's so hard to make a good decision. It feels like you have no idea what's going on. You don't know if you should be going forward, if you're winning the fight, if you're losing the fight, what's happening. Your teammates just see you looking like a chicken with your head cut off. So it feels really bad for your teammates because that looks really bad. And I always feel like the opposing team does not even appreciate what is being done to you. You know what I mean? So like,
it's true.
It doesn't.
No, I 100% agree with you.
It doesn't feel like I'm playing the Graves. I put the smoke screen down. I'm like, great, I did it. That was smart. But like, I'm not like feeling super satisfied about that. The opposing player is feeling horrible, and the opposing player's team is just like, wow, I have an idiot on my team. Like, what is this guy doing? So it's so frustrating for me because you just end up doing like, it always feels like the wrong thing, and that's one of the things that's the most frustrating about Quinn top and also Graves jungle.
But it's super powerful.
It is super powerful.
And it's kind of the same readability problem, sorry to increase this tangent, of Trundle ult plus Zeke's combo.
Yeah.
Because you're making your AD carry actually 25 to 40% stronger usually. And what does that mean? He's kind of glowing a little bit white. And then you've ulted the opponent, who's now, depending on when you timed your ultimate, could be upwards of 3 times as squishy if you did it perfectly on a Sejuani after Aftershock or something. And what's happening? They're a little like fuzzly and like getting slightly smaller.
Fuzzly.
Yeah, I can't even describe what it looks like. It's just really hard to read. And then the pro teams know how to exploit it, and that's why you see that stuff. But pay attention to that if you're trying to figure out who's winning.
Do you guys have anything that you think is going to change from what we saw in play-ins as far as the meta to what we're going to see with the major regions joining group stage? Because I have one in
we
store
will see
from a league first.
Fewer Kai'Sa picks.
More bans. Okay, that's not a
we
good one.
only saw 3
Something
picks. We will see.
You're forgetting about the mid lane jungle Kai'Sa from GBM.
You go first, man.
Anything
You got one.
surprising.
You got one. Just go for it.
I feel like I don't know if you're going to consider this surprising or not, but I do think that there is room for Conqueror, Kled, and some of those style of bruisers to actually play up in the top lane. If people want to continue to blind pick tanks, I do think there is some room. It's a more risky style for people to try to abuse it, whether it's a Conqueror Fiora or a Kled.
See Khan popping off
sort of picks. Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's definitely the ability to do that, especially with like some of the mismatches between teams, right? Having Khan on a Jace or having Khan on a carry like that can completely decide a game.
I think we'll see Jace.
So I don't know if that's surprising or not. So,
yeah, I think Jace is definitely.
What was yours? You said you got one.
I think mid lane. So mid lane right now is super interesting to me because when you're reading off all your list of champions, Anivia is super powerful right now and is also showing up, but not as much as I would have thought when talking to a lot of the mid laners right now. A lot of them think that she is so incredibly strong. So then I always go the next step. Whenever I hear about that, I'm like, okay, what can I beat it? Yeah, what can I beat it with or whatever? And me personally, against Anivia, I always like super long range. Some people have said, Kassadin or whatever, but yeah, the Kassadin always seems so risky to me, even though you can turn off her ult and it sounds good on paper. I feel like he always puts himself in a little bit too much danger to do that. I'd much rather have Xerath and Vel'Koz, these two. But I feel like there have been so many times in the history of League where I've been like, yeah, Vel'Koz, he's coming in. He's going to be the surprise pick or whatever.
But
and
this
then, like,
time is happening.
And then like, he will pick him one time or something. Or show like once. But I really do think Xerath and Vel'Koz both are super good into Anivia. So if we see people kind of tunneling on this and just being like, oh yeah, Anivia's super strong. We got to do that. Get the early tier and, Ceres and all that stuff. Hopefully we'll see those next level counters.
That'd be hype.
One step ahead to see, because like good Xerath play, like it's always fun to watch people try and dodge the ultimates and stuff like that. And I feel like good Xerath play, if they're landing a lot of their skill shots in lane, it's just so incredibly oppressive.
Yeah.
And if you then have to counter the counter then you're gonna have to. It's like only Banner really is gonna help you out with that.
Yeah. Here's what I would do against Xerath, because it cycles, right? Then you just do Banner Karma.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I was
But
saying.
I don't think that you would ever really be like. I don't think you're saying that you would be blind picking Xerath or Vel'Koz only as a counter pick.
Only as a counter pick to something like Anivia. And that's a tricky thing about mid lane for me right now is that Banner mucks everything up a lot of the time with what's actually like good. Otherwise, I'd say Azir.
The Fuzzly Mucky Banner.
Yeah, the
Azir should go higher in priority, but he is so destroyed by Banner, more so than anything else. That's kind of what's keeping him down. We're like 50 minutes in. We should get to the other 4 teams in group stage.
Yep.
Fine.
We've already previewed these teams a little bit in some of our previous episodes, like 3 weeks or a month ago, but we have a new meta now. We know the patch exactly they're playing on. Kingzone, RNG, Fnatic, and Liquid. Everyone has Kingzone as the overwhelming favorite, right? Because they lost, I believe, 2 matches in the entire LCK regular season. One of them was during a suspension of their top laner. So they've only lost 1 match with Khan in the top lane. And then they 3-1 to Freaka Freaks in the final. How many games will they drop? I'm not even asking, are they favorites to win? Because everyone will predict them. But how many games can we expect Kingzone to drop?
I honestly, like, it feels bad to say, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they didn't drop a game or maybe like 1. I mean, SK
RNG.
We've never had a 10-0. We've never had an
SKT
undefeated
got to the
team.
finals without losing. I believe wasn't it last year? And then they.
No,
I thought.
I would check.
So maybe it was 2 years ago. I'm thinking it like within recent memory.
So 2 years ago, SKT went 6-4 in group stage.
Okay, so it wasn't 2 years ago. Maybe
Because
I'm
that was
thinking about Worlds.
RNG was.
Am I thinking about Worlds? What was the?
You're
no.
probably thinking about Worlds.
Yeah, maybe I'm thinking about Worlds from a couple years ago. But I mean, I think definitely, like if I had to bet, I'd say one game, 2 games, maybe. Like I think it's possible for them to drop games, but I think there's like, I would be absolutely flabbergasted if they lost like a series or something like that. Like I think maybe 1 game, 2 games that they.
I feel like my faith peaks at MSI in the middle of the year, and I'm just like, yes, we can do it. We're gonna take multiple games. NA's going.
How many then?
I actually think that I think RNG looks pretty competitive. I think that okay, Team Liquid, they can maybe get one of them off a game, but so I feel. I mean, like Jazz said, they're definitely super favored, but I feel like they could definitely drop some games.
So what's the
2.
number?
I'll go 2.
That's what I said.
Wait, you said 0. You said 0.
I just said 1 or 2.
Oh.
I
started with, I wouldn't be
it's
surprised if they're
possible.
He said 0, 1, and 2. So do we all get 3 answers?
Yeah.
Okay,
I go with the
if
same.
If I have to bet 1, I'll say 1. Like if I have to go into 1 number, but like I think I said it's
Wait,
it's
how
not
many games do they play?
It's
10.
not impossible for them to lose no games, but I like if I have to bet, I'd say 1 game, probably maybe 2 games. Like I don't see it going above that.
Yeah, I have the MSI history for us now.
Yeah, okay.
2015, when the group stage was a single round robin,
Yeah.
SKT was undefeated.
Okay,
They were
that's
5 and
what
they were
I was
5 and
thinking
0.
of, yeah.
But then they went to 5 games against Fnatic in semis, and they lost the finals to EDG that year. The next year, they were 6-4, with RNG being 8-2 as the number 1 team. And then last year, they were 8-2 again, with WE being 7-3, and a bunch of teams at 4-6, and like the weird 3-way tiebreaker. So
I like 2 games, 1 to RNG and 1 to.
One to TL?
Team Liquid.
Yeah. I'm going to say 2 games in group stage, because even though they are this pretty much unstoppable force in Korea, they don't win every single game, obviously. And they have, I feel like, struggled a little bit adapting to the international stage.
Okay.
Last year, during the World's group stage, I had that bet with Deficio for a Destroyer jacket, where if Kingzone Law didn't go 6-0 in the group stage, I would get his Destroyer jacket, and I'd give him a Tibbers if they did. I did give him a Tibbers, but I would make that bet 100 times out of 100, because they nearly lost to the Gigabyte Marines in that 1 game. And that was in a 6-game group stage. We made that bet after they're already 3-0. We're now giving them 10 games. I think they probably lose 2, because you're playing really good teams in RNG, Fnatic, TL. I think those are always going to be tough to play perfectly 6 times in a row. And I think we've seen it before. Winning 10 games in a row against the number 1 team from every region in the world is really hard. I think that's why it hasn't happened before. And I think a team like Kingzone, even though they're super good, don't have the international experience to dominate every single game.
It's just terrifying because you talk about the 6-0 group stage at Worlds, and I think they're just a better team now. And I'm just like, God.
And
They have
more
as far as
experience
international experience, all those guys have played internationally.
Peanut won MSI last
on the
year.
big stage
Yeah.
and won. So
They are terrifying.
BDD is the one.
They're so much better, I think, than every other team there. That it's like
100% agree that they are so much better than everyone else,
Yeah.
and it's almost making me like less excited for the tournament that I'm just trying to figure out who's going to finish second.
Yeah.
But BDD is one potential question mark because he was so amazing last year. He won the MVP of the LCK this split. But I think about the bracket stage game he played against Samsung where he looked nervous almost the whole time. He stopped being reliable. He was flashing into turret for kills instead of just playing the incredibly reliable, strong, leaning, roaming style that he'd done the whole time. And there's still a possibility that something like that comes back. And also, there's a possibility that someone actually beats Khan's Jace, even though no one's been able to do it, right? That's a different thing they're doing. And if we're going to say, if they lose, how would they lose to inject that little bit of intrigue into it? When they actually have lost, it's generally because their bottom lane is behind. That's the deficits that actually lead to defeat. And they give Prey or Prey takes lower resources than almost any other AD carry there. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's a bad thing in this meta. And I think if they want to play optimally to this meta, they need to give Prey more farm, which does require a bit of a shift. And if they struggle in that shift, there's a chance they lose some games.
that's what they were also saying before the finals. And then we saw him on the Kaisa with like 4 tanks all around him and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, this feels great. I got all the support here. I'm just super fed, Kaisa or whatever.
And he's not getting Kaisa 10 games in the group
Okay,
stage.
so
that was ridiculous.
So let's not focus on that example because Kaisa as a champion should be, not get through, I don't think, in very many, if any, of those types of games. But I do think that we may see them put a little bit more emphasis down towards the bottom.
I 100% agree they'll do it, and I think they'll be great at it. I don't see.
Yeah.
That
said, they suck.
Yeah, I think. But if there is a way that they would struggle, it would not even in Prey's ability to take the farm, but in Khan's ability to play with low farm. That's actually the larger worry. But I think he'll be fine. I think they're great.
I mean, he's still really good on tanks and everything, but I do agree. Like that's if they were to lose, it's probably going to be through bottom lane getting ahead because that's something where teams are good enough that you can snowball the map, you can take towers, you can get gold leads, and you can do that.
And let's talk about what the bottom lane is going to look like at this tournament.
Insane.
Because it is goddamn hype.
Yeah,
Uzi's
RNG.
coming. We got Prey. We got Double Lift, Reckless. Everyone is pretty much giving the rightful dues to Uzi right now. I think Reckless and Double Lift both very early on came out and they're like, Uzi's the best in the world right now. Both of them have stated that before this tournament. I don't know if anyone if Asprey or whatever. I was looking for like interviews and stuff.
They're hoping that Uzi buys into the hype and underperforms.
But we'll
Kobe.
see. Yeah.
He's saying that he's the best, so he'll stop trying so hard.
So when I was like going back and watching RNG games and stuff, listening to the casters drop some of the stats, and they were like, "Oh yeah, Uzi's got an 18.9 CSD at 10." I was like, "What the? I have almost never even heard over the whole season. Like an LPL plays so many games."
Yeah.
I was like, "Are you kidding me? Uzi has an 18 something CSD."
Well, Uzi didn't even play the whole season for RNG, which I think tanked their standings a little bit. Up until the Lunar New Year break, he didn't play. And then he came back after that and then was fine, right? He's actually one of the only players that I remember that takes such frequent breaks from the regular season just to come back and still smash in the playoffs. But I agree with you. His stats are stupid.
Yeah.
And they've been stupid good every time he's played. Like before the 2014 World Championship, I was comparing total kills because I don't remember exactly the numbers, but ManCloud was the number one kill person in North American LCS. He had like 176, and I was thinking, wow, that's a record. And then the LPL played exactly as many games, and Uzi had 250. And I just couldn't believe how many more kills he had. But he's the same. He's still really good.
Yeah. I mean, in playoffs in general, like watching their playoff run, Uzi was insane the whole way through, right? And he was really outshining opposing AD carries, playing against Jagulov, and and there's lots of great AD carries in the LPL, like obviously SMLZ and iBoy and all these guys. But he looked so much a cut above these other guys who are world class AD carries that it's pretty insane to like really realize how good he is. And it's kind of funny because Reckless was saying that it's like Uzi is so much better that it's like unattainable. Like you can't even become that good. Like and then Perk said Reckless is better than Uzi, but but
Perk says what he wants.
It was pretty funny just to hear that from Reckless. Like I think it's praise from like other top level people is always so impressive to me, right? Like when you hear people that are like, "Yep, he's just too much better. I can never be that good." The end, right? You're just like, oh. But people think you're the best. How does that? Wait, what does that make him?
So Perks you can recognize the smirk on Perks' face whenever he's trolling.
He also said Hillsang was the best support.
He definitely has that. He goes like he has this grin. He's like, yeah, guess what? I'm about to drop a bomb on you guys or whatever. But
from just ready, here I come.
It's always so fun watching Uzi because it's weird. It feels like his champion will like move faster or something than watching another AD carry. And you always look at a team fight or something and you're like, oh, that's cool. Like he's in the perfect spot. He's getting auto attacks off on the priority target or the squishy over here. You're taking down the assassin or something. And those things all coming together aren't by chance. That's why people like Reckless and Doublelift are always praising him. Even though Reckless and Doublelift are pretty different styles of AD carries. When you get praise from like both of those two different styles, I feel like that means even more.
Yeah, and here's one thing that I think benefits Uzi this year is how he's had a pretty stable support on RNG now, and he's had Xiaohu in the mid lane, and even though they've mixed between MLXG and Karsa during the regular season, they've looked best with MLXG. An example that the LPL casters said during their final is oftentimes when Uzi has looked bad, it's because he's expecting a teammate to do something else for him. So take a situation where Zach is elastic slingshotting in, right?
And
have you heard this?
Can I just interject real quick though?
Yeah.
When you're saying something like that, unless they got it like from Uzi, that's like them like projecting, right?
They're projecting, but
just saying. So
it's not a quote from
accurate.
Uzi. It's definitely not a quote from Uzi, but it looks accurate in the way you play and how you can kind of try and get to that next level of AD carry that people talk about. Because just imagine a scenario where Zach is coming towards Uzi, who's on Twitch. He has flash up. A lot of people say, flash the elastic slingshot, otherwise it's going to hit you. But a lot of times, Uzi won't, because he's expecting a Thresh to flame out of the air, or if he has an Alistar support to headbutt it preemptively, or something to make it so the Zach doesn't reach him. Therefore, he'll use his flash later in the fight. And you need to play with the same people for a long time to get that type of coordination in team fights. And I think that's what is unheralded about RNG is like Xiaohu's contribution to Uzi being successful. What Xiaohu does in team fights to open up space for Uzi to succeed is what kind of makes RNG.
So I remember that exact play where they have a Zach is sieging the tier 2. Uzi on Twitch is right under his turret, and Zach is on a ward, charging up his elastic slingshot. So they have plenty of time where not much else at all is happening. And if you're saying he's expecting, I forget who it was, but someone had a knockup or something.
It was Braum.
Yeah, and someone was close. Okay, so maybe it's that. If he's expecting one of his teammates, to do that, then I actually might turn that into a criticism of the team and be like, there's no split pushing going on right now. What are the team comps right now that everyone sees Zach charging up elastic slingshot? What is the disconnect there? And that's where I'm like, okay, that's them giving a possible reason for what happened.
For why
I'm really
maybe
curious.
He just didn't see it.
I'm so curious. Like I want them to actually interview and be like, review the team comms, what actually went down in situations like that, because so many of those situations pop up in League where we're just like, well, it looked like they were thinking this, and you don't really know until we ask them afterwards. But now, since you brought that up, I got so excited because I remember the exact one, and I was like very curious what exactly happens, because he ended up doing nothing, and they got engaged on it, he got killed, and we were like, Uzi?
You could track him down. You could find him at MSI.
Question mark? Ask him how to pronounce his name.
Use some Google Translate.
Last time I talked to him face to face, that was the question.
That was 4 years ago.
We're old.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time for another chat with Uzi.
Another chat, but yeah, there's been so much talk about AD carries in general at the tournament. Like it's been really fun hearing all the different people weigh in on it. Even hearing Sven talking about the difference between Reckless and Double Lift was kind of fun for me. And he was talking about how he thinks Double Lift is so much more focused on lane, whereas Reckless is more focused on dominating team fights and more willing to lose lane and these sorts of things and the picks and everything that happens because of that. And then you were saying hearing both of those guys complimenting Uzi is so cool, but Uzi feels like the combination of the two, where he has the dominant lane and he has the incredible team fighting, and the AD carries at this tournament are going to be so good, which I think so many people are looking forward to. Even if Kingzone is favored, like seeing how Prey does against Uzi and how he does against Double Lift and Reckless and those guys going up is going to be a lot of fun. But it's clear that Kingzone is the best. So maybe we should start getting into who we think is second best, third best, fourth best, because to me that becomes extremely hard.
Yeah, I currently have RNG favored there. I feel the fact that even just based off of regional strength, I would have preferred to see IG here, actually. I think that's what we were previewing in all these other games. Did you guys hear about what happened to the Shy? I need to get more confirmation on this, but I hear it was a cooking injury. So he either burned his hand or cut his hand and couldn't play for a couple weeks.
Azael did the same thing. He microwaved something that you shouldn't microwave, and then he grabbed it with his hand and burned it.
How long could you not play for?
So to give some context, so I sound less stupid. We have a bunch of black bowls, and there's one of our bowls out of all the bowls is not microwave.
One is not microwave safe, and every other black bowl.
Yes,
you should get rid of that bowl.
I should.
You're trolling yourself, dude.
But I didn't even know that we had one that wasn't microwavable. Right?
Okay.
So I have these it's like frozen noodles and veggies thing that sometimes if I just am getting for a quick meal, so I microwave that. I reach in, same time, same everything. It's kind of warm, but it's not like it's burning hot.
Yeah.
I take it and my thumb just melts off, and I'm like, oh my god.
Same time, same everything, except different bowl.
Different bowl. So I got screwed.
How long were you out for?
I mean, not really that long. Yeah,
okay.
it was intensely painful. I would say for 2 days.
Okay. Because the Chow was out for 2 weeks.
My entire thumb is just like a blister. It's still a blister 2 weeks later.
Oh yeah, I see it.
But it's not. It hasn't hurt for a long time.
Okay.
But I mean, I could see if you were trying to be if you're trying to be super tryhard, if you actually burned your hand, obviously more than just a finger or something, you'd be donezo for a while probably.
Yeah. Anyway, RNG beat IG 3-2 with Duke instead of the Shy. That's part of the reason they're here. I still think just looking at the way the LPL teams have done at MSI and even at Worlds in the last few years, I'm going to put them a slightly higher favorite, knowing it's the bot lane focus meta, and we just spent 10 minutes talking about Uzi. I don't actually think he's just the god of AD carries. I think he can make mistakes, but I think it's reasonable to assume that he is at a higher level than Reckless and a higher level than Double Lift, unless either he underperforms or one of these other two guys overperforms. And that is so much of what makes you win right now, is your ability to play around a skilled AD carry. And I think RNG is the best of that of the three teams between them, Fnatic, and Liquid.
Yeah. Other things I like about them, Xiaohu is a very good player, but he also has been very willing to play Morgana mid in addition to the Karma mid and stuff that we've seen. So, he's willing to go support mids or basically whatever you need for any of these team comps. And my all-time favorite, MLXG, is back. I love watching him play, whether he's going level 1, feeding over a first blood, standing right in front of the enemies, auto-attacking him to death, or whether he's going red buff into first blood, into, absolutely dominating the game by 3 levels or something like that. I love watching this guy play because he does make the crazy plays where you're not even expecting it, right? And even a couple seconds ahead of time, I'm like, you wouldn't have thought of this play, right? But then he also will do, sometimes it backfires, or sometimes he does some boneheaded stuff. And Uzi will yell at him.
They coined that. It's the MLXD.
Yeah, I really enjoy that.
It happens 3 times a game.
It's so funny too because everyone has good games and bad games, but MLXG has both within the same game. Yeah, it's he has exactly good minutes and bad minutes. He does these insane. I remember at Worlds, him playing Gragas, and he would do body slam pre-flash predictions to where they're going to be, and and flash with their flash and stuff, and get them. And you'd be like, this guy's a monster. What is he doing? And then he splashed into a wall and like
Yeah.
ulting and saving.
there wasn't a person there. I
and
thought there
like
would be.
and it's just like, oh my god, man, this guy is this fucking faker, and then he's you, and it's just like you don't know what you're gonna get. But he's definitely a lot of fun to watch.
So anyway, who do you think is second, RNG, Fnatic, or Liquid?
It's really hard for me. I was actually talking with Froska a little bit about this, and she thinks that RNG is worse than the Western teams because she thinks that they have a lot of drafting issues. So it'll be.
She also does that sometimes where she's like, all right, this is going to be the one where I undersell.
So does Papa Matthew with Korea. You can't trust them.
How can you You can't possibly undersell Kingzone.
I feel like almost every regional caster does this, though.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it
since
this
the beginning of time.
I'm going, yeah, Team Liquid. We
Team
gonna
Liquid
do
number
it.
2. There you go. I'm not underselling them. Full confidence.
I'm not overselling you.
Oh, okay.
No,
You're selling at the correct price.
Yeah.
Third, fourth?
I still.
What's the correct price?
Since I'm trying to edge myself into second, but it's difficult. Give me a couple minutes. I'm gonna work myself.
I mean,
up.
I love making arguments for other people.
Yeah,
Like, if you want to give me the Liquid second place argument.
Win conditions.
Yeah.
Do it.
Okay.
Get me hyped up.
All right. Remember Rift Rivals, for one.
Oh, I
Right?
like that.
Yeah.
This is a
Well,
good start.
I like, yeah.
This is a good
Go. It's
start.
good
Double
story.
it.
So EU, they're garbage.
Yeah,
then.
Doublelift and Biofrost crushed every bot lane in Europe there. So why are we suddenly saying that Reckless is better than Doublelift because he got like pentakills against other European teams? Doublelift is the guy who's going to be able to perform. So that can put them above Fnatic. Also, Caps learned how to play side lanes this split. He didn't even know how to do it. Like earlier before. These are not my opinions. These are other people's opinions. Remember,
Okay.
right? And so I don't think, not to mention, Soaz had the hand injury, or Bwipo, who's played like 6 games, right? They're going to have
don't like
volatility in the
Bwipo.
top lane, and he gives up first blood so many times. So I think that one's easier. The harder one to justify is them over RNG, especially because Doublelift does not have a great track record against Uzi. But you know who does have good track records is Xmithy at MSI. He's actually made the finals before, whereas MLXG, did he make the finals last year? I think he may have. But
Besides from the time where he made the finals,
but
he has never made
they weren't even the best team in the LPL, Kobe. They should have lost to IG, not to mention they have drafting issues, right? Like, you don't know exactly what they're going to play. They played with 2 different
That
top
makes a
laners
good
during the
point.
regular season. They played with 2 different junglers during the regular season. They played with 2 or 3 different AD carries. The team's barely gelled, whereas you have TL who's played the whole split.
So
That's actually really hard.
Yeah, the Europe one, even the Europe one for me too, because Fnatic does look really good, and Soaz is coming to MSI.
Yep.
So it's not like, and I think they said he's going to play.
He said he's going to play.
Yeah. So too bad we can't just go with the Bwipo route and be like, oh yeah, that's our. I actually, Fnatic is also, it's a little bit harder to judge because I felt like the competition was a bit worse in Europe than it was in NA as far as the overall rest of the teams.
Yeah.
And Fnatic, I felt, were just so much better than a lot of those teams, like way better. But that isn't like a direct way where you can take away and be like, oh, well, therefore, Fnatic aren't as good, because they definitely dominated. So I think they're also looking pretty scary.
This also happens every year where we watch the NALCS and then we watch the EULCS and we say the overall level of NA might be a little bit stronger, but then you come to international events and
Like Rift Rivals. Remember, we're starting back to last year.
Rivals, the only international event of
There you
last
go.
year.
At the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter if the overall level of the league is higher if the top teams are at the same level, right? It's just that generally speaking, you would think, okay, well, if the overall level of NALCS is higher, then Team Liquid should have higher competition, should have better practice partners, should be able to improve more, thus making them better, right? That's kind of the argument. At the end of the day, I think I will still have to put RNG second, but I think that this next group is actually very close. I wouldn't really be super surprised if any of those teams got to second. I do think that any of them could be in the mix. I think Team Liquid I would have at 3 and Fnatic I would have at 4, but I do think it's all extremely close. And yeah, my major concern for Fnatic is that Europe lost some of their strongest competition. G2 looked remarkably weaker than they had in the past. That ended up being Fnatic's biggest competition. And that may not have prepared Fnatic for some of the best teams that they may be playing against. That's like my biggest concern for Fnatic, because the loss of Sven and Mithy and stuff. G2 is a very different team than they used to be, and I think having those two ultra elite teams in the past helped kind of elevate each other's games and help them to succeed internationally.
Yeah. And I would say definitely Reckless and Hillsong playing together looks really good. The one thing that I'm also a little bit worried about, so I know Soaz has been playing with one hand. Like, he bound a lot of keys to his mouse, and he had mouse keys
transitioning
going.
back is tricky.
Even though he is going to come back, and you're like, oh, right, sweet, they got Soaz for international competition. Like, he's one of the most experienced League players of all time, because he's been playing since the very beginning.
Rematch versus Khan.
Yeah. How's it? Maybe his one-handed practice was like a. What's the Dragon Ball Z training chamber called?
Hyperbolic
time chamber. Yeah. So he's actually going to come out with some crazy strats that he was able to develop.
He doesn't even need a second hand anymore.
One-handed training. So yeah, I definitely could see it happening, and and Fnatic being better, but
totally.
I'm obviously biased.
Are you at TL number 2 yet? Have you gotten there?
Rooting for Team Liquid.
What's your 1, 2, 3, 4?
I have to wait till at least I see a game or something.
What? Until the start of
our rankings right now. We don't get to it.
Let me ask him how scrims are going real quick.
No.
Get to.
Make your power rankings.
Yeah.
All right. I'll just toe the line. I'll go Kingzone, RNG, Team Liquid, Fnatic.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to put Fnatic 3 in this one.
Good. You can have the European viewers on your side.
Until they finish second, and then I'll get flamed anyway. Because if you do not predict the strength of the best team...
He's going to put Fnatic number 3, but he's going to put TL number 2. Woo!
RNG 6th. Kingzone 4th. But yeah, I think that even though Team Liquid was dominant in the playoffs, they had so much inconsistency during the regular season that I'm not necessarily willing to say they're now going to dominate Fnatic, at least. And I know none of us are saying that, but to confidently put them above there. But I will not be surprised to see any of these three teams in the finals. I think it is more likely that RNG gets there, and I think it is less likely that Liquid does, but I won't be surprised if it happens, if that makes sense. They're really close teams, I think. I
guess the other question is then, do you guys think that any of the teams coming from play-in can compete with these four, right? Or is it really like a four-horse race, no chance? Because TSM didn't even get out of groups last year, right?
Yep.
So Flash Wolves did instead. Can the LMS be that fourth team? Can Vietnam?
So you're asking
Massive
me,
or whoever?
can NA get knocked out by a wild card? Yes,
it can happen. I mean, also remember last year that G2 was 4-6, Flash Wolves was 4-6, and TSM was 4-6.
Yep.
So that 3-4-5 was super, super, super close.
Yeah.
And I do think Flash Wolves has gotten measurably weaker. So I would be more surprised if these four teams were not the four teams in knockout stage this year.
What about Supermassive? Do you guys think that Supermassive could, if they get through, or EVOS, like, do we see them being able to compete at all? Or is it because I agree, I definitely wouldn't have them ranked in the top four, but it's just kind of interesting as a thought exercise. I mean, Gigabyte Marines, obviously they didn't make it out of groups, but they took games, right? They were competitive. They were a threat. And my kind of opinion from watching, at least, I think Supermassive could maybe, but like the thing is, I think if you are like a weaker team, you do need to start playing crazy styles to be able to take games, because if you play pure standard and you just do it worse than your opponent, you probably cannot win. And that is why I think Gigabyte Marines was a special team, because they were able to execute on a high level, had some really talented players, and were willing to pull off these strategies that people were not prepared for, and then kind of fell victim to. So to me, I don't really see a lot of hope for a Gambit or a Gigabyte or an EVOS taking a lot of games off of these teams, unless they can kind of show us something different than what they've shown in play-ins, and show us some really different strategies, because I do think you have to surprise teams at that level.
I think it's pretty unlikely that we would see it, but there's a lot of unlikely things that happen at international events. I will say that.
That's true.
Albus Nox Luna going 4-2 in their group stage, being in a tiebreaker for first place a couple of worlds ago in the same
while
group.
no one was willing to practice them too.
Yeah.
Like they
played WoW.
talked about
they
talked about they were like playing World of Warcraft and doing other random stuff.
Yeah, I think I was
practice partners for a while.
Yeah, it's so hard to predict, and this is an excuse. It is an excuse, but I think it's also true. They are random events for the most part before they happen. They are weighted before the event that these things could happen, but like the performance of someone on the day in that minute against another opponent with so many different variables thrown in, there are scenarios where non-expected things will happen. Right? So I think it's possible, but I still expect the other 4 teams to
All events are random events.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go.
Constantly increasing. And
Do you remember
chaos.
Doctor Strange talking about the 13 million different scenarios?
14.
Spoilers?
Thank you very much.
14. That's not a spoiler. There's just a lot of different scenarios.
A lot of scenarios.
And I'm going to say there's at least one scenario where there's 13 million scenarios. There's at least one scenario where Gambit wins MSI.
You give them 1 out of 13 million. I like
to
those
win
odds.
MSI. Yes.
Place
it
your
could
bets.
happen.
That'd be a fat payout.
It would be. I don't think no casino would ever give those odds to anyone. Yeah.
I don't feel so good, Mr. Dat.
We're going to move on to Twitter questions, but I wanted to bring something up because I've been watching the NBA playoffs. Have you guys been following the NBA playoffs at all?
I've been following the Raptors losing to LeBron.
And this is what I want to talk about, actually. The Raptors, it just hit me.
Feels bad, man.
Actually, are so similar. The Raptors in the Eastern Conference playoffs or against the Cavs are basically TSM at international events. Like, I feel like it is so. This is one of the best basketball analogies I've seen, because you look at the Raptors this year, man. They won. What was it, 59 games in the regular season, number 1 seed in the East. Everyone talked about the measurable improvements they had made from the last year to change their game, and this time they will be able to compete in the Eastern Conference playoffs. DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry are all-star, superstar players that will perform in the playoffs this year. They shoot threes now. They're better. And what happens? DeMar DeRozan's benched in the fourth quarter against LeBron James. They lose the first 3 games to them. They're down 0-3 in the series, and they're not even making the conference finals again.
But to be fair,
But there's reasons to believe that they would have been better. They just never are.
well,
It's like
to be
TSM,
fair, though,
man.
they lost by 1 point in game 1 and 2 points.
To be fair,
three.
TSM did beat Samsung. And it was close the second time.
And to be fair, they smashed them in scrims.
I'm just saying that.
And to be fair, there were reasons to think they're better, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
I know.
It's
That's my
crazy.
kind of my point is just that they're not getting absolutely slammed, just like TSM. TSM doesn't always get absolutely slammed, right?
But it doesn't matter.
Yeah, of course. The game score is the only thing that matters at the end of the day, right? And that's what happens in these tournaments. And people are very quick to forget that sometimes it can really be one little thing, that makes the difference between getting knocked out in groups and winning an event. I'm not saying for TSM in particular, like, I'm not saying they were going to win Worlds if they got out of groups or something, but just like I had events in my past where we barely squeezed out of groups, and then you win the tournament, right?
Yeah.
And it's like maybe one tiny little thing made the difference between us winning the last game in groups. Otherwise, we would have been like 10th in the tournament or whatever, and instead you get first, right? It can be small differences, and sometimes those can also snowball with confidence in things, right? When you talk about barely losing a game versus barely winning a game, even though it's like really not that much of a difference as far as what actually happened in the game. It's such a mentally different thing.
All right, let's get some Twitter questions.
Anyway,
going.
Also, you just wanted to flame the Raptors.
Raptors suck.
here for a while.
I'm from Canada. I wanted them to win, but it was sad. Okay, Miles, or at the Wada Daddy, Pedretti Allen, I think is his name. What would you say about Zonias being replaced with some other arbitrary AP armor item, but then having the Zonias active turn into a summoner spell? And if you did that, what would the cooldown have to be?
Oh, I don't want to see Zonia's active all the time.
That's stopwatch. That's what we saw, right?
And he's saying as a
it
summoner.
turned
I know,
into a summoner
but
spell.
I'm just saying as far as like what it can do to the game, right? Like having a widespread Zonias, I feel like we got to have a preview of what that would be like with stopwatch.
Yeah.
I didn't like it personally.
I think it's super OP. I think the cooldown would have to be so high to, like, you're thinking, what do you take, Barrier or Zonias?
I take Zonias 100,000,000%
Flash,
of the time.
I think Flash
Exactly.
Zonia's for
Flash Zonias for everyone.
Exactly. And then at that point, if you're trying to balance it, what do you have to make the cooldown? It has to be like 12 minutes before you're going to take Barrier over
12
it.
minutes is
And
longer than
that's
Flash.
just a terrible game. That's why I don't think you would actually ever make it a summoner spell.
It's so tough to play against and like to balance that thing, especially at the high level, because it's one of those things that's like it's actually not good when not used well, right? Like when you just use it when you're guaranteed dead and whatever, you just wasted it. But when people start using stopwatch to juggle turret aggro when they're diving you and things like this, and people are actually executing that well in the top lane, especially with multiple resets, it's like that's so horrible to play against. That it becomes extremely powerful. I personally wouldn't like to see it. As far as what the cooldown would have to be, I think it would have to be massive. You'd have to be like
you get one per game.
Yeah, stopwatch, right?
It's a stopwatch. Can you bring a stopwatch or ignite?
Like 8 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that. If I'm trying to give a real number, something that's significantly longer, like massively longer than the others, because it's just too good.
I'm just going to say we're not going to do it. Benjamin Gribben, or FBS Gribben, says, what do you guys think of making the champion played in a match banned for the rest of the series? It would drastically increase the importance of pick ban strategy and reward team-sized players, depth of play more than S-tier meta comps. I think this is stemming from one of our pick ban discussions in previous episodes. I've had this idea kind of thrown around in my head a lot too. And as a way of increasing champion diversity, I actually personally really like that. You play a whole series and there's champion scarcity throughout the series. What I don't like about it is that there's no good way of mimicking that environment in any other game set, right? You're either playing best of ones or best of threes in your regional league. You're not going to be getting in situations where you're playing in a game 4 or game 5 of this. And it's kind of the same reason I didn't like blind pick game 5, even though it gives you a different experience. That's exactly the problem as well, is that it's no longer testing the same skills that got you there. And kind of for that reason, I don't necessarily like it, even if there is a lot of positives to it.
Yeah, I mean, I like the excitement of changing champions and seeing different champions, but I think the most accurate point is the not testing the same thing that we're testing from people.
And this can so easily get really ugly. There's 18 80 carries in the game. You can have, in one game, 12 80 carry pick bans possible, right? Even just one team can contribute 6 of them if that was their strategy. It's just, let's just get rid of 80 carries. The game becomes very, very different. And that's exciting in some ways, but also it does some funky things.
Well, I think if they made this change where you can only use one champion then per series or whatever, then you would definitely have to change our ban structure. So I don't think that would be a single part changing. I think it would be changing in addition to something like that.
For me, it's just it's probably not as competitive, so it wouldn't happen. But I would love to see this for like All Stars or something like that, right? Make this, put that in for All Stars. It's already a more fun event. Force some diversity upon it. See what it does to the game. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, honestly, I like Nemesis draft, where you basically draft champions that your opponents have to play. Like, what if we played a whole league of that?
I think it'd be fun.
Because then what do you have to practice? Like, it just makes the practice for pros so annoying because you can't practice what you're going to play this weekend because you don't know what you're going to play. And you're like, all right, I'm going to practice this set of like really bad champions because I think they're going to give me these. And then they like surprise you and they like give you some other random champion you didn't think of.
Oh, no, they gave me Kaiser.
We have like, how many? I don't even know how many we have anymore. We keep, there's like over 100.
Something.
Okay, over 130 champions. You have to be ready on all champions at all times. Go. Okay, not all champions, just for your role or whatever. You can swap with your team, maybe, but
it's tough. Impossible.
Things like that seem interesting. I like Nemesis draft, especially if you're talking about All-Stars and stuff. I like those.
Nemesis draft is something I've been trying to get them to bring to All-Star fun modes, to force it to be an actual fun thing. I was talking with some people about that and trying to get them, like when we talk about one for all or like, the tandem mode where one person's playing keyboard and one person's playing a mouse and people are like, but some people just take it too serious. Other people are trying really hard. That kind of ruins it. You put Nemesis draft in that sort of stuff. It
corrects for so much.
Exactly. Yeah. Like then everyone's giving each other hard champions. I think Nemesis draft is perfect for the fun modes at All Stars, but this could be really cool too.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it for Twitter questions. We do have some very important housekeeping to do though. Because this is the last episode we could do from here. We're going to be taking our road kit for MSI so we can do an episode there. If there are tiebreakers, because we're going to basically record our next episode after the final day of groups. If there are tiebreakers, I believe Isaiah will not be.
We'll see how
it goes.
Because we want Isaiah to be in.
We'll try and get it out the day after
Only if we're super dead.
But the reason we have to do something here is every time we have a road kit, one of us has to lug it around.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be this super heavy duffel bag that was a huge annoyance. Now we have something with rollers, but we still need to play rock, paper, scissors to see who has to take it.
Yeah, who's going to have to lug
Also,
around
every
all
time
the
I've had
gear?
to take it, I've gone to secondary inspection because you have a giant bag full of electronics and stuff, and they're like, "Ooh, I don't know about this."
Put your laptop down. We're
I
opening
feel
it
like-
in full view. I feel
like 1 in 3, I shouldn't have to do it because I do the audio setup. How about that? Yeah.
No, I've taken it 80% of the time because either we're drawing straws.
That is a
or I'm
very
using
bad
glasses.
rock
Last
paper
time,
scissors
didn't
player.
we all bounce out by the end?
By the end of
No.
Worlds? Yeah.
It was close, but I definitely took him.
I think he's just being a crybaby.
Yeah. I'm going to lose. I don't care. All right.
Wait, what did you guys pick last?
It's not on shoot. It's on rock, paper, and then
Scissors.
scissors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Oh, yeah.
that's
All right.
Okay, so that's between us now.
It's a good thing. I was thinking in my head that my default was scissors, and then Kobe said he used to remember what people do, and I'm like, if I
leaked my
throw
strategy.
scissor, I
right.
need to just do
All right,
paper. 'cause
ready?
Okay, I got it.
Oh, I shouldn't have said anything.
All right,
feels good.
Ready?
Okay.
Rock, paper, scissors. Fuck! Yes! No!
All right.
Okay.
Anyway,
That's going to do it for this episode of The Dive. I normally have something to read off of right now. Anyway, we still have Play-In knockout stage that's going to be happening.
Tuesday
Evo's
night
Supermassive.
in US.
Yeah, group stage is going to be starting on Friday in Berlin. The schedule is on lolesports.com.
I think it's on
with
Thursday.
the exact times for all of us. So
Pretty
don't
sure
listen to
it's
what
on
I'm
Thursday.
saying. Check lolesports.com, check Reddit, check Twitter. All of the correct times will be there.
Jay is nothing
We'll
without
see
his
you then.
script. Oh.
I am Jack.
Exposed!